There was a time, long before history hardened into dates and ruins, when the world itself seemed young enough to listen. In those days, the earth had not yet learned indifference. Rivers slowed when something beautiful passed along their banks. Trees bent their branches not from wind, but from curiosity. Even stone, ancient and unmoving, was said to remember sound. And among all mortals, there was one whose voice and music did more than please the ear. His name was Orpheus. He was born beneath a quiet sky, the son of Calliope, muse of epic poetry. From her he inherited not only music, but memory. The power to shape feeling into sound so vivid it became impossible to forget. Some claimed that Apollo himself gifted Orpheus his first lyre, its strings strung with divine care, its wood cut from a tree that had grown listening to the wind. As a child, Orpheus learned quickly what others took lifetimes to grasp. His melodies could calm storms of anger, lift grief from weary hearts, and make strangers feel less alone. Animals followed him without fear. Shepherds paused their work to listen. Even kings fell silent when he played. Yet Orpheus did not crave admiration. Music to him was not power, it was language. The only one honest enough to speak the truth of the heart. What he did not yet know was that every great song carries its own ending, and far away, in the green, wandering places of the world, Eurydice lived a life untouched by prophecy. Eurydice was a nymph of the forests, born not to grandeur, but to freedom. She learned the names of trees before she learned fear. She knew which streams ran cold even in summer, which paths vanished after rain, and which clearings filled with fireflies at dusk. The earth accepted her as one of its own. She laughed easily, often at nothing more than the sound of her own footsteps in dry leaves. She spoke aloud to the sky when she thought no one listened, and when she danced, barefoot, unburdened, the grass bent without breaking beneath her. Though many admired her, Eurydice belonged to no one. Love, she believed, should arrive like a song, not demanded, not forced, but recognized. She did not know that somewhere beyond the trees, a melody was already searching for her. It was late afternoon when fate finally grew impatient. Orpheus sat beneath an old ash tree at the forest's edge, his lyre resting lightly against his chest. He played without intention, following a melody that seemed to rise from the earth itself. It was unfinished, restless, aching for something unnamed. Eurydice heard the sound as she gathered wildflowers nearby. At first she mistook it for wind moving through hollow branches, but the music lingered, warm and deliberate, tugging gently at her attention. Without realizing she had chosen to do so, she followed it. She found Orpheus with his eyes closed, brow drawn in quiet concentration. When he looked up and saw her, the song faltered, as though surprised to have found its answer. Neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, Eurydice told him the music felt like a memory she had forgotten she owned. Orpheus smiled, a little stunned, and said it felt that way to him as well. From that hour on, they walked together. Their love did not arrive like lightning. It unfolded gently, patiently, shaped by time and attention. Orpheus played for Eurydice beneath the same ash tree each evening, weaving melodies from her stories, about hidden springs, about the way the forest sounded just before rain, about loneliness that crept in only when joy faded. Eurydice listened not as an admirer, but as an equal. She asked questions. She challenged him. She taught him the quiet names of things his music had never needed before. In her presence, Orpheus learned silence. In his, Eurydice learned stillness. When love finally named itself, it felt inevitable. They were married beneath no roof but the heavens. Orpheus sang his vows, each note a promise shaped from breath and devotion. Eurydice answered with laughter through tears, her voice untrained yet truer than any song. The earth bore witness. The gods noticed. Some smiled, others turned away. For love unguarded has always made immortals uneasy. Joy rarely announces its ending. On a bright morning, Eurydice walked through tall grass with her companions, sunlight warming her shoulders. She did not see Aristaeus until she felt his gaze. Fear sharpened her steps. She fled without care for direction. The serpent struck unseen. Pain burned through her like fire through dry leaves. She fell, breath tearing from her chest, fingers digging into soil that had always welcomed her. When Orpheus arrived, her eyes searched for him. She tried to speak. Then the world went unbearably quiet. Orpheus sang until his voice broke. He sang until the earth itself seemed to ache. But death did not listen. Days lost meaning. Nights stretched endlessly. His music became a vessel for grief so raw it left listeners weeping without knowing why. At last, hollowed by sorrow, Orpheus chose defiance. He would go where the living were forbidden. The entrance to the underworld did not announce itself. There was no gate of iron, no warning carved into stone, only a cavern hidden deep within the hills, where sunlight thinned until it felt uncertain of itself. Orpheus stood at its threshold for a long time, lyre heavy in his hands, listening to the last sounds of the living world. Birdsong faded first, then wind. Then even the echo of his own breath seemed unwilling to follow him. With each step downward, the air grew colder, heavier, as though sorrow itself had weight. The walls pressed close, slick with moisture that gleamed faintly like tears. Orpheus felt fear coil in his chest. Not fear of death, but fear of hope. For to descend was to believe Eurydice might still be reached. At the cavern's end, the world opened into shadow. The river Styx stretched wide and black, its surface unbroken, reflecting nothing. Along its banks gathered countless souls, drifting like pale smoke, murmuring fragments of lives unfinished. They did not cry out, they did not beg. Their grief was quieter than that, and far heavier. At the water's edge stood Charon, ancient, bent, his eyes hollow as old wells. The ferryman regarded Orpheus without surprise. He had seen kings and warriors come pleading. He had never seen a living man arrive with a lyre instead of coin. Charon raised his oar to bar the way. Orpheus answered with music. He played not loudly, not boldly, but with careful restraint. The melody spoke of waiting, of promises delayed but not forgotten. It carried the weight of grief without bitterness, of love without demand. The murmuring souls fell silent. Charon's hands trembled upon the oar. Slowly, so slowly it seemed time itself leaned closer. He turned his boat aside. The living crossed into death. Beyond the river, the path narrowed again, winding through shadows thick as fog. The air tasted of iron and dust. Somewhere ahead echoed a low, layered growl that vibrated through bone. Cerberus waited at the gates. 3 heads rose as one when Orpheus approached. Each pair of eyes burned with a different hunger. One savage, one watchful, one endlessly tired. Chains bit into the beast's neck, anchoring him to a duty older than memory. Orpheus did not raise his voice. He knelt. The first notes he played were scarcely sound at all. They were rhythm, heartbeat, breath, a song shaped like rest. The savage head stilled first, confused by gentleness where it expected fear. The watchful head followed, ears lowering, growl dissolving into a soft, uncertain whine. Last was the tired head, heavy-lidded, longing for sleep it had never known. Cerberus lay down. For the first time since the world was young, the gate of the dead stood unguarded. Orpheus passed without looking back. The underworld was vast beyond imagining. Not a place of fire and torment, but of absence, of colour leached away, of sound softened until it became memory rather than noise. Plains stretched endlessly beneath a dim, starless sky. Pale rivers cut through fields of ashen grass. As Orpheus walked, the dead gathered. They did not touch him, they did not speak, but as his music carried forward, they remembered. Hands reached for warmth that was no longer there. Faces lifted as though towards sunlight they could not see. Lovers stood shoulder to shoulder, recalling names that had once been everything. Orpheus sang as he walked, because silence here was unbearable. And then, at the heart of it all, rose the palace of Hades. Hades sat upon his throne of dark stone, unmoving as the mountain roots beneath the earth. His gaze was steady, not cruel, but unyielding. This was a god who ruled endings, and endings do not bargain easily. Beside him stood Persephone. She alone brought contrast to the gloom. In her eyes lived the memory of spring, of blossoms and return. She listened before Orpheus ever played, as though she already sensed why he had come. Orpheus did not beg. He sang. He sang of first meetings beneath ash trees, of laughter carried on warm air, of promises made without fear because tomorrow felt certain. He sang of the way Eurydice listened, of how love had taught him silence as much as sound. The dead leaned closer. Persephone's tears fell freely. Hades remained still, but when the final note faded, he spoke. "Love," he said, "has crossed my kingdom. That alone is no small thing." The bargain was simple, and therefore terrible. Eurydice would be released. She would follow Orpheus back to the world of the living, but he must walk ahead of her and never look back. Not for reassurance, not for doubt, not even for love, until they both stood beneath the sun. Trust, Hades said, was the last test. Orpheus accepted without hesitation. Only Persephone looked away. The path upward was narrower than the descent. Orpheus walked first, every step echoing too loudly in the silence. Behind him, Eurydice followed, but she made no sound, no footstep, no breath. At first, Orpheus's hope burned bright. He counted steps. He focused on the faint pull of warmth ahead. But doubt is patient. What if she stumbled? What if the gods deceived him? What if he had mistaken hope for mercy? The darkness thinned. Light appeared, pale and trembling. Just a few steps more, and then fear spoke louder than faith. Orpheus turned. For one perfect, devastating moment, Eurydice stood behind him, reaching out, her face filled not with anger, but love. Then the light touched her. She began to fade, her form unraveling like mist beneath the sun. Her fingers slipped from his grasp. Her voice found him only once. "Orpheus." Then she was gone. The underworld did not answer his cries. No song opened the path again. No god intervened. Orpheus returned to the living world alone, changed beyond repair. His music never again sought joy. It sought truth. And truth, he learned, often sounds like grief. He wandered, playing for strangers, for mountains, for the empty spaces where Eurydice had once stood. Love failed to conquer death, but it dared to challenge it. And for as long as songs are sung of devotion and loss, the world will remember the man who walked into darkness for love, and the woman who followed him all the way to the light.